started. So thank you all for selecting this breakout session. This breakout session is Everyone is Welcome Here, creating an inclusive environment for members of the LGBTQAI plus community. And we have Kenya Anderson from Indiana Youth Group here to speak with us today. She has a full bio available on Eventbrite, and the PowerPoint presentations here will be posted on IUCD's website shortly after the conference so that you will be able to reference them. And without any further delay, let's please welcome Kenya.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm from Indiana Youth Group. Is everyone familiar with Indiana Youth Group here? Yes, okay. So I work with the young adult population, 18 to 24, and the Rapid Rehousing Program, Project PRISM. We work primarily with youth that are LGBTQ+ and their allies, a community resource for them, as well as the Rapid Rehousing Program, which allows housing for 2 years with a possible third-year waiver if they need that extra time. And so during the time in that program, we provide rental assistance for 2 years, as well as utility assistance, case management. The goal is for them to be independent, so after those 2 years, they don't find themselves in a state of homelessness again. All of our youth in our Rapid Rehousing Program are chronically homeless, so they've been homeless for at least a year or longer, have some disparities, whether it be physical disabilities, mental disabilities, and so sometimes we do put them in permanent supportive housing. So that is another goal the case managers work with. My background is in social work for about 10 years. I've been with Indiana Youth Group as a director for about 1.5 years, and I have taught. Been a teacher. I've taught every grade level from preschool to 12th grade, and that's pretty much my background. So we are going to get started on this very important topic, which is near and dear to my heart. And this is creating an inclusive environment for members of the LGBTQ+ community. So, you want to create a welcoming environment for members of the community. So you first have to understand what the experiences are to create that environment. If you don't understand the client, it's hard to create an environment that's welcoming. So when we say welcoming, we really have to kind of break down what that means, because we can say we accept people. We can say that we help a certain population of people, but we don't want to just be tolerant of people, but we actually want to create a welcoming environment. So those are two different things, and that's really what I want to talk about today. We want to be relatable, but we also want to make sure we're not trying to create a faux sense of community with the people that we're serving that are part of the LGBTQ+ community. We want to be genuine and authentic, because when we're not, you can feel that. Think about yourself. When someone is being disingenuous and they're trying really hard, but there's no substance, there's no education behind the words that they're speaking, you can feel that. And when you don't have your client's trust, it makes it difficult to work with that client. Anytime you have the trust, then your client will believe in what you're saying. They believe that you actually want to help them. And working in social work, that is our goal, that we actually want to be a help to our client. And the more that they trust you, the greater help you will be. So it's all about being a more effective worker, being a more effective manager for your team, but it starts with trust. So we have to look at how we can build that. How can we respect their unique perspective and experiences, especially, I'm not going to say if you're not a part of the community. Even if you are, we all have different experiences because we're not a monolith. You know, we're all different. We all fit different intersectionalities. So our experiences are going to be different. So we have to start by listening to our clients and what their experiences are and what those experiences are true for them. So if someone comes to you and they're talking about an experience that they have, and they're saying, I'm being discriminated against because of my sexual identity or my gender, how does that make you feel? Do you initially have a reaction of doubt? Do you say, I don't, even if you don't say it out loud, internally, how do you feel? If you doubt what they're saying, then there is some soul searching in yourself that you have to do. Because you might not say that you doubt them, but the clients can feel that. So that takes some education on our part. Because like I said, even if you are a part of the community, that does not give you an automatic download of all knowledge and association of LGBTQ+. So it does take time to educate yourself and educate yourself on the population that you're working with. So that's sometimes doing classes, things like this, going to seminars. There are a lot of different resources. IYG is a resource. We do training for nonprofits. That training is free. Sometimes we do barter services, but it is a free training for nonprofits. So I can share my information at the end of this because it is very important. I've worked in organizations where we've had a large population of LGBTQ clients, and the staff that worked with them had no knowledge, and it was very, very hard. It's actually how I ended up at IYG. An organization I was working for, we worked with youth, and we had a very large population of LGBTQ+ youth, and I noticed the staff where I was teaching who were with these youth day in and day out, had no knowledge of the language to use, had no knowledge of what the youth were going through, even to identify different, none, zero. And so I actually reached out to IYG and said, do you have anybody that can come in and do some training for our staff and do some cultural competency and talk to them and learn how to work with our youth? At that time, they didn't have anybody going out in that position. They do now. We have a whole training and education team that helps you train your staff, come out and have those conversations on how to be more effective with the populations that you're serving. So when we are looking at housing, we have to look at the unique challenges that we're facing when we are dealing with LGBTQ+ individuals in housing, because they are unique. There are discriminations that happen. There's a situation, one of our current clients, so this is a real story, this is not a hypothetical situation. She was 18, just turned 18, about 18 and 3 months, and she decided to let her family know that she was trans, that she wanted to transition from male to female. And when she shared that information, her family said that she had to leave. They didn't give her 6 months to save up some money and get her things together. They didn't give her 3 months to get her things together. They gave her that night. Get what you can. We don't care if you can't get everything, but you can't stay in this house because that's an abomination. We don't believe in that. I have a son. I don't have a daughter. If that's what the name you want to be called, if that's the gender that you want to identify as, you have to leave. So this young lady said, then I'm going to leave. She believed in living her truth, where she said, I'm going to leave. So she had a few friends she could stay with, but she's young, 18 and 3 months, so most of her friends are living at home. So that also cut some of her resources because some of her friends' parents also did not agree. So that cut the list of people she could lean on for support. So as she is sleeping from couch to couch, she found a job. Didn't pay that much because that is another place of discrimination. People are looking at her and saying, oh, she's trans. So she found a job. It didn't pay that much, but it allowed her to save a little bit of money. And so she's looking for an apartment, trying to find somewhere to stay. Because she doesn't make a lot of money, she's not able to find places in the safest communities, not the nicest apartments or neighborhoods, but she did manage to find a pretty decent studio in a halfway decent neighborhood. She's on the couch of her last friend because she only has limited time at each home before she has to leave. These parents are saying, you know, we can help her out a couple more days. Hopefully she can sign this lease. She fills out the application online, gets approved, barely squeaks through the income guidelines, gets approved, pays the deposit online. She's going out for the final walkthrough with the leasing agent, because the first walkthrough she did with the, the lockbox and you go through by yourself. So she's going through the final walkthrough with the leasing agent to meet them for the first time, to put the keys in her hand and sign the lease. She shows up and they say, oh, it must have been some mix-up, some misunderstanding. We actually just rented this morning. So sorry you came out. Was very apologetic. We know that that's not true. I'm so sorry that you came all the way out. We'll give you your deposit back, but we actually just leased it this morning. So now her time is up. She doesn't have anywhere to stay. She doesn't feel safe at the shelters because of her identity at birth. They're going to put her in a men's shelter. She doesn't feel safe there. So this young lady lives in her car for over a year. So when she comes to us, she's in that chronic homelessness status, and we get her housed. Working with our case managers, it was still difficulties because she had experienced so much trauma during that time. So when you have a client and they're coming to you and they're saying, I have experienced discrimination and I've experienced trauma, you have to think about stories like that on what they have went through before they get to you. And it might not be something that you can relate to, but that's why we have to listen to their story so we can understand the path that they went through, because their story is not my story. Especially when you're talking about members of the LGBTQ+ community, there's a thing called being clocked, and it's mainly in the trans community, but it can be used across the whole community. So basically somebody can look at you and develop an idea of who you are based on your appearance. So we're talking about some trans individuals, they'll say, well, I can tell you used to be, masculine, or you used to be feminine. Or if you have a masculine presenting woman or a feminine presenting man, and people feel like they can clock you and they know what your preference is. So that creates some barriers. But if I go by myself, like I don't get clocked. No one looks at me and says, oh, I think that, she's a lesbian. So I don't have that barrier, but then there are other barriers that I do face. I myself have been discriminated against for housing. Once the owner of the house found out the person that was living in the home was not my sister, but that she was my wife, we were on a plan for rent to own, had lived in the house 4 years, had set it up, moved in. When I was signing the lease, I could tell that she did not agree with gender-loving relationships, the comment that she made. So I'm like, I need somewhere to stay. So I'm just going to go along with it. Because she said, your sister, I know you're not one of those nasty people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, what? Where do I sign? What did you say? So 4 years we lived in that house. At some point I was just like, I have to be who I am. And she figures it out. She figures it out. And she did. And I think she asked about it. I was like, yo, this is my wife. That 5th year, all of a sudden, no lease re-signing. Everything was paid on time, and so was rent to own. So she even gave us our money back because we were saving up for the to buy the house. Gave us our money back. Made up an excuse saying, "Oh, well, we need the house because we have some family coming in, and they're from wherever, and we need them to move into the home. So if you could, we're not going to re-sign the lease." So these were condos, and they were kind of in a cul-de-sac, and my neighbor across the way, so they were detached condos, like little houses. And so my neighbor, she calls me when I moved, and she was like, I thought you said the owners were moving in. And I was like, well, that's what she told me. Absolutely was not what happened. She just ended up renting it out to somebody else. So these are experiences we have to think of when we are working with clients, because sometimes it's not always readily seen that we can just look at them and come to a conclusion about what they have been through. But we also have to be sensitive to that. So we can't be sensitive if we don't understand what they're going through. So it really takes that time to understand their situations, but most of all, educate yourself, because you can't understand something if you don't educate yourself on that. So that's very important. So those are just some of the challenges that they face. So why are we talking about inclusivity? It seems like it's talked about everywhere, you know, DEIB, all these different things. Well, like I started off saying, first of all, it gives you a foundation for respect, mutual respect, and trust. And you want to feel like you belong. And that's for anybody across the board. So for example, if your significant other, your partner, your spouse, or even a close friend calls you, or you call them and you say, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm getting ready to go get a bite to eat. And I got invited out by some friends, just got off the phone. We're going to go out to a new bar. You can come if you want. That's like, okay, they're my friends, so it sounds like they want me to come, but I don't really feel welcome. Now, if you call that same person and they say, oh, I'm getting ready to go get a bite to eat, going out to this new bar somebody invited me to, I would love for you to accompany me. I want to spend some time with you tonight. Would you have a drink with me and go out to eat? You know, I would love for you to hang out with me, and I would love to be in your presence for the night. That second response makes you feel welcome. I'm putting on my shoes before we hang up the phone. That second response makes me feel like you want me there. And that's what we have to make sure with our clients. We are not making them feel tolerated, but we are making them feel welcome. Because the first response is you're tolerating me. That's how, and it might not be the case, but that's how you're making me feel. And that's what we go by. We go by how you make me feel. You can have the best intentions, but if I'm already coming from a place of hurt and vulnerability, how you make me feel is so important. And if you make me feel like you're just tolerating me, that is the energy that I'm going to give back to you. And it doesn't matter that you're helping me. That means nothing. If you think about it in this scenario, if you look at an animal that's been abused, mistreated by a previous owner, and now you acquire this animal to nurse it back to health, and it's in its crate and you feed it every single day, but you don't give it any attention, you don't make it feel loved and wanted, but you are taking care of it. You are feeding it, you're taking it out to walk, and then you put it back in the crate, and every day this is the routine. So the dog is getting stronger, getting healthier, and one day you take it out the crate to walk him, and he's not ready to go back, so he snaps at you. And you're like, well, I fed you and nursed you back to health? How dare you? But you did not establish trust. You did not foster that relationship. So don't think that just because you are helping someone and doing good things for them, that is equivalent to building a relationship with them, because it is not. Especially when they've experienced trauma, especially when they are used to people judging them and not supporting them. That is up to us as providers to build that relationship with them. So that is why inclusivity is important. So when you walk in IYG, a little different because our client population is the LGBTQ plus community. So you walk in, so many flags. I think there's like 30 last count that I went through. So not saying you should have 30 flags, different sexualities. But if you do, even just have the rainbow flag up and have what we have on each one, because I don't know all of them, but underneath, so they're on the wall, and underneath there is a sign that explains what each one is. And we had a young adult coming, matter of fact, the one I started the story with the housing. When she came to IYG, this is another big thing, using inclusive language. And I said, hi, my name is Kenya, what's your name? And she gave me her name. And I said, is that your preferred name? And what are your pronouns? And her eyes just welled up with tears. And she was like, oh, nobody's asked me that before. And then she sees the trans flag and she's just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So that brief 2-3 minute interaction broke down so many barriers. And her case manager probably had a lot less fighting she had to do to prove herself that we're really in her corner. And so when they started working on the things that they needed to work on, there was already less resistance because she felt welcomed. She didn't feel like this place is just here because they have to help me. Even though these are the jobs that we choose, there's still a mindset that we're forced to help our clients. But we're not, we're here by choice. Yes, we do get a paycheck, we have to live, but it is still a chosen occupation and you don't get rich doing it. So it's obviously something that we have a passion to do. But when you're working with clients that have a lot of trauma and different things going on, they don't understand that. Especially if they're used to dealing with the system, it is that resistance of feeling forced. So they're like, you know, I'm forced. Like our program, they walk in the door and they sign up on their own and we still get the same resistance. Like it's not connected to any government entity or anything like that. So we take a lot of time to educate ourselves so we can make our clients feel safe and feel welcome, because it also helps us work with them because we're building that trust. And when things are easier for us with the client, we see our success rates much higher in our clients completing their goals and being independent and having long-term success and being able to be stably housed, which is the goal when you're working with youth, young adults, adults in housing. The goal is to not find themselves in a position of homelessness after your support has ended. And they're able to listen more effectively when you have built that trust. So it's really just about educating yourself with them. So using inclusive language, like I talked about, very simple, just asking pronouns. Is this your preferred name? That client was not going by their preferred name because they weren't used to having that question asked. They didn't think people would take it seriously. Even when I get emails, I always respond with the next email being, what is your preferred name and what is your pronouns? Because even on email, sometimes that is that name that they no longer use. So even if it's written in an email, I don't make an assumption that that is the name that they want to go by. So these are little things that we can do to make our clients feel welcome. That's just kind of a start. Making sure that we are trained for cultural competency and terminology. So there's so many programs out there. Like I said, IYG is one of them, but I don't want to endorse anybody else. But we have our training, but there are so many that will provide free training or low-cost training to organizations. It is something that's important to do. It's important so you understand, just like with any culture, you have to have an understanding, and the LGBTQ plus community is no different. So like I said, just being a part of that community does not make you exempt from training, because though I may be familiar with some of the issues that are faced in women gender-loving communities, that doesn't mean that I am reversed across the board. And so I had to take the time to learn about the trans community and take the time to learn about men in the community and take the time to learn about all aspects. It's not something that's just automatically known. So really taking that time. Also connect, so this is a big one for me, and what I worry about with our clients is them having support after us or even with us, because we can't do all things. So making sure that they have community connections. So getting information. So like I keep saying, IYG is one, and we continue to expand across the state of Indiana. So we'll be an option for even more people. We're in the process now of an expansion project. So we're having an office opening in Crawfordsville. Evansville will be on the map. We have Columbus getting ready to open very soon. And our goal is to expand across the state of Indiana. So that will be a greater option. But we also travel for training. But making sure your client knows that there are supportive resources, support groups, healthcare. That is important, to find providers that will not discriminate against them. Many across the state, but it is connecting your client to those resources, because a lot of times they feel alone. And so your goal is to make sure they understand that there is support, that they aren't alone, that you do understand, and there's no judgment. Another tip when you're working with clients, especially if you're having a client that's gender fluid. So one day they might show up masculine, and then the next day they show up feminine. To not make a big scene about that. That can be very uncomfortable, especially if you've built that trust and they trust you, and your reaction is big on one end of the spectrum, but not the other. That can definitely influence them. We're dealing with a client that's kind of in the middle of that right now. So if you're going to compliment, make sure it's equal. We don't want to push our opinions or what we feel onto the client, because a lot of times they're still trying to figure things out. Or if they have figured it out, they don't want to feel condemned, or they don't want to feel judged for that. So things like that may be deemed as innocent, like I was just complimenting them, they look really good today, but you've never said anything if they are presenting in a different gender. That is internalized, that are things that they think about, and it might be something we didn't think about. So I was just giving them a compliment. I never even considered that. So those are just things to consider. So once again, just want to overview the benefits. It allows us to be more effective at our job, and we're more effective. The clients are getting the help that they need. When we are creating inclusive and safe environments, another thing that we want to make a point of is make sure that we are not tokenizing our clients. And a way to do that is education. So it goes back to that educational piece. So we don't want to have a faux sense of community and have all these flags up. And it's like, hey, I love the gays. And there's no substance behind that. You haven't learned anything. If they ask you a question, you're like deer in headlights, because you're just saying, I like you guys, I love the community. How are you helping the community? What have you learned about the community? What do you understand about the challenges I face in the community? You're just being a cheerleader, but there's no substance. So that's not what the community needs. The community does not need cheerleaders. The community needs true support. And when you are truly supporting someone, that's when they feel safe, and that's when you can build that trust. I feel like that is the key when you're working with any group of people, but especially vulnerable populations. That is the key. And when we're looking at housing, when we are talking about the LGBTQ plus community, your risk of homelessness goes up between 20 and 40% just because you're a part of that population. And especially youth, which is who we work with at IYG. So many of them have the same story. When they came out, they were immediately ejected from their homes. And some people are coming out, are turning 18 in high school. So we had a client, they turned 18 January their senior year. They had to get out January their senior year. They contacted us the summer before because their parent already told them, when you turn 18, you're getting out. So they were being proactive, saying, hey, can you guys help me? I know my mom is going to put me out. What can I do? So they reached out. We were able to put them in transitional housing until they could come to us at 18. And so now they are with us and they are safely housed. But that is a story for so many people. And so we can't have a bias in us and say, you're not being discriminated against because of your preference. Nobody, well, because of your sexuality. That is another thing, and I still have to change. Saying the word preference can be offensive because preference makes it feel like it's a choice and it's just who you are. So if that is something that is in your vocabulary, please make an effort to change that word and don't use the word preference, just say your sexuality. Even though it's not meant to be offensive, it is one of those things that can come across as being offensive. So that happens with a lot of youth. When they are 18, they're asked to leave. And that is probably about 70% of the young adults in our housing program. They have that similar story. And so it's working with them to build community, because they might have to now work on a chosen family. And so that is another term to familiarize yourself with. A lot of youth and young adults in the LGBTQ plus community have chosen families because their family has abandoned them. And it's just the reality that happens. And so that is also why building those community supports and networks are so important, because sometimes that is all that they have, or at least the only support they have that is accepting of them. And that's when we go back to creating that welcoming environment, because that is what we all want. We don't want to go anywhere and feel like we're just being tolerated. Wherever we go, we want to feel welcome. You want somebody to say, oh, they want me here. And that's when you have those lasting relationships. That's when you're seeing success, because when someone trusts you, they're also trusting the information that you are giving them. So when you say this program is going to help you, or I can hook you up with this connection for this job, or if we do your budget, it's going to help you. And they'll believe you because they trust you. But if they don't have your trust, they're just going to go through the motions and say, this is just somebody else. It's just a job. They're like everyone else. So it is really taking the time and understanding that it is a different culture. It's just not a person who happens to love someone that is the same gender, but it is an actual different culture that you have to take the time to really educate yourself about, just like any other culture. And it is not something that can be relatable by proximity. So if you have a child, granddaughter, best friend that is a part of the LGBTQ plus community, that does not make you an expert by proximity. So you probably shouldn't even bring that up in the conversation, because I would be a little offended if you do that with any other population and it would be offensive, then don't do it with the LGBTQ plus community. Because if you say to me, I know what you're going through because my granddaughter's Black. I don't think you do. I don't think you do. So it's the same thing. So you're not an expert by proximity. You really have to take the time to educate yourself, because once again, every experience is different. People have different intersectionalities that they are part of. Everybody's experiences is different. So you really have to take the time to learn, educate yourself, because the ultimate goal is our clients. The ultimate goal is us growing as individuals. In order to do that, we have to educate ourselves. Life is a continuous learning process. So we should be in that process of learning. We should be in that process of growing, and that only benefits our clients, that only benefits our organizations. Because when our clients succeed, the organization succeeds. And if we're a nonprofit, when we succeed, that also equals money. Let's just be honest. That's grant money, that's funding. And with that funding, we're able to help more people. And that's what the ultimate goal is. So we don't want anybody walking away from our organizations feeling like they were just tolerated and nobody understood them. It could be you that makes the difference in their lives. Sometimes it just takes one person, and they might not have anybody else, but you can be that one person. It is important, because also suicide rates are higher among the LGBTQ plus community, which is why IYG exists. If anybody doesn't know the background of the organization, it exists. The founder worked a suicide hotline in the 80s, and he noticed that a lot of the youth that were calling were a part of the LGBTQ plus community. So he was like, what can I do? So he started having kind of like group support meetings at his home. And so they would just meet and kind of talk about things and have someone that accepted them and that they could relate to. So it started in his living room. Then we moved into a separate location in Indianapolis, like on Allisonville Road. It was still just a little house. And they met there for probably 28, 29 years at this house. And they would just hang out. They would have programming, food pantry, feed them, but they would just meet at this house. So about 6, 7 years ago, we were able to move to a bigger location. It's like a $5 million building, 4 stories. We still feed the youth. We still provide programming. We have a food pantry, clothing closet, transition room for our clients who are transitioning. But it all started because the suicide rate among the LGBTQ youth was so high. And so that's what we still focus on. And that's why we create programming. That is why we educate ourselves, because we still have in 2023 youth coming to us with the same issues, the same fears, the same suicidal ideologies. And so if we're not educating ourselves and being proactive before they show up to us, we really don't know what's going to happen. But we do know in educating ourselves and being sensitive and inclusive that we are saving people's lives. We do know that. And so I don't know everybody's organization and what you do, but if you're here, I would believe that you are helping people in some capacity and wanting to be a service to the clients that you serve. And so that is why it is important, because it is a different culture. It is something that we really have to take our time, because it's much more than just having a partner of the same gender. It does involve other aspects, other discriminations, other experiences in life that you might not have. So it is very important. It is something, like I said, is near and dear to my heart. I make sure the staff that I work with is trained. We do several different organizations training throughout the year, go to conferences, different things, because the climate is always changing. So what you learned 5 years ago, you have to refresh yourself on what's going on now. It's constantly changing. So that is another thing, to stay up to date. So I would say at the minimum, every other year, offer some sort of training. And I feel like that's a long time in between training, but I also understand funding and having, the ability to send people to training. But at minimum, I would say every other year, because language is changing, and you want to make sure you're being sensitive to your clients' needs. You want to make sure that you are using the right language. So like in 2023, the word queer is becoming more acceptable among certain populations, but then you have some of the older populations that are like, I don't like that word. It still has a negative connotation for me. And some on our staff right now. So it's interesting, because even our staff is split. And you have some staff that are saying, no, I don't like that. But in a lot of circles, it is an acceptable term now, where it didn't used to be. So staying on top of the language, staying on top of what is relevant for current society, that is also important as well. So that, I believe, is the last slide. This is all I have. So I wanted to leave time for questions. Yes.
Do you have informational content at all? Like anything? So true transparency and vulnerability here.
Yes.
I work for a police department. I'm a mental health professional.
Okay.
And I also live, full transparency, in a very conservative community.
Mm-hmm.
And so this, surprisingly, with my officers, they're very open, but they're also very crass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've noticed planting seeds is how I've been the most impactful in our department. Is they'll come and ask me questions. They'll close my door and ask me if it's confidential, this conversation. But having information has just been like being able to put things up. It took me a second to kind of put, my love is love pins up, and I haven't put my gender unicorn up yet. And
put it up.
I know. And so I think that information is so, like, for me, it's so important because I have to be very careful about, it's hard to, just the crassness, it's just hard to, it's a barrier to come about. But, fortunately, there's a lot of open-mindedness. I just think that there's a lot of impatience as well, like with officers in the community. They don't feel like they have the time to ask a pronoun or do these things. And so sometimes it's just me being an example to them while we're in a crisis intervention. Like I want to say in the last 4 weeks, we've had quite a few suicide calls. And I would say 80% of them would have identified within this community. And they had no idea. And it's not because, and from my perspective, these officers, it's not that they don't care. It's just that getting training is so hard to do. They hardly have the time to do the training that they're supposed to be doing for their law enforcement. So doing these things. So that was my long-winded question. Is if there's information, or if you know where I can find a larger variety of informative content.
So IYG actually develops our own training materials and information. So matter of fact, what I wanted to do, and I forgot to say this, our business cards, so they're digital. So if you want to get your camera out and you can scan my QR code and I can go around so you can have my information. But all of our training materials are developed and formatted by IYG, and I'd be willing to share that. Our trainer is Angie. She will get that material to you. We do have training that goes out, but I do understand it's hard to find the time to do so, but we also do have those materials available.
How far do you travel for training?
All over the state. Well, Angie does not. Yes, for nonprofit organizations, the training is free. Sometimes we barter services, but if it's not something that we would use, we still do it. We are currently working with IMPD for training. We've been fortunate, a lot of the officers that are in our neighborhood, we've been able to kind of talk with them and come in, and we've had some situations. They've been so sensitive, and you can tell like they're being very deliberate and intentional.
Yes.
And so because we had success in working with them, we were able to kind of get our foot in the door. So now we're actually going to do a full formal training.
How we need it
Yeah.
so bad.
Are those trainings open for organizations that don't specifically work with youth?
Yes.
So for me, I mean, like, I was born in the 60s, and I'll be 62, but, when I grew up and in high school, grade school, whatever, the word faggot is all we knew about. As I got older, like as a grown person, I think I saw this show called Queer Folk or something. Then I'm learning that name. So now that I'm older, I'm learning a lot more names to use, or the proper names to use. But I gotta be honest and say, I am nervous sometimes. I'm a married man, my wife, 30-something years. And I work with the homeless population, so I'd be around those who are, I don't know, gay or whatever. But I get nervous with some of them. They never see it, but the ones that I know and talk to, they say the wrong things, and I kind of, instead of me trying to offend them, they offend me. Because I think they say things and I'd be like, too much information, huh?
Give an example.
Well, one that talked about a drug, and it's called ice. And the things he said ice sexually put him in. Why are you telling me that? And you're in my car with me. Why do you think I was comfortable of hearing that? And then another guy, well, I know he's gay, whatever, because his tendencies, whatever. And it was at an event, and it was cold, and he didn't have on a coat, and I was dressed, most everybody was dressed for that occasion. And I said, well, you should have wore a coat. And he's like, oh, I'm just out here trying to be sexy, Why are you telling me that? I'm sorry. And I just get, I help everybody and work with the homeless population. I do them all the same way. So if I even help somebody that is, it's a word gay, if I help them, I'm sorry if it's not. I do this for everybody. I'm not doing it because I want you to think that I like you sexually, or I got a crush on you or whatever. Don't take it that way. I just help everybody.
Well, that is a good point that you're making. So one thing we find in the homeless community, unfortunately, a lot of people, not just LGBTQ+, but it is prevalent in the community, are doing sex work to survive. So that reaction is not geared specifically to you, but that is a survival skill that they've used. And so they're still in survival mode, so those skills aren't cut off. So maybe I can get a little change, who knows? We know that there are a lot of individuals working in these fields that don't have the best intentions and do take advantage of vulnerable populations. So it probably has worked before. And so these are just survival skills that they are using until they can get out of survival mode. That is one of the hardest things working with our youth, is getting them out of survival mode, and that's building that trust. So when things like that happen, I generally just kind of sweep it under the rug and keep moving and being professional, but I also don't make a big deal. I don't address it. I'll just kind of laugh it off. Okay, well, let's get to the next thing and let them understand that this is a safe space. You don't need that for me to help you, but that a lot of time that is the survival technique and response that they're having. A lot of times they've had to put themselves in those situations to survive, especially if they are unhoused, which is now saying homeless is offensive. It is unhoused.
Yeah, people
So,
experience homelessness.
yes, people experience homelessness or
Individuals experience
unhoused, yes.
homelessness, exactly.
Is a technique that is often used. So they're just doing what they know. So it's not even directed towards you, but it is probably something that they have experienced. It may have worked in the past with someone in authority that probably should not have allowed that to happen, but it may have. So they're just using the skill set that they know.
And I think just recently in Fort Wayne, that's where I'm from, there's a building or a facility that opened up now for the LGBTQ plus to go to now. It's like in all these years now, they finally, I don't know where it's at, I kind of caught it on the news, but I'm glad they finally opening up something to help these individuals, or to, somewhere they can feel safe, or somewhere they feel welcome, if you
And
will.
then, yes.
Yeah,
there's
just open up. in Fort Wayne,
needed so
yeah.
many, like even with our program, we're expanding. So we have our youth center, we have the rapid rehousing program. We're also looking into getting a transitional housing program, emergency shelter. We're looking into direct cash transfers. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those, but there's just not enough resources, especially when we're dealing with housing, because the options that are available, a lot of times they don't feel safe. They don't feel like they can turn to those.
And that's what I'm doing. Fields of Dreams is a homeless shelter that I'm trying to open up in Fort Wayne. And I was really, until I'm learning more about the LGBTQ plus, my shelter was gonna be for McKinney-Vento, kids who are in public school corporation, because we got a lot of those that are homeless. And now I'm finding out more about LGBTQ, and I'm like, okay, so I need to try and focus on that too to help them. Then I thought, can I have a shelter where maybe this wing is the LGBTQ?
Absolutely.
And then this wing is whatever?
Absolutely.
Would that be discriminatory? I didn't know if that somebody come down and.
If you are requiring LGBTQ individuals to stay in one part of the shelter and non-LGBTQ individuals to stay in another part of the shelter, that would probably be considered discriminatory.
That's what I thought.
So what you would do, you open it up for LGBTQ plus and allies. So that way there's no discrimination and people can say, well, I feel more comfortable staying over here, but you could not say you cannot stay
Okay.
over. So it's just like our organization is open to LGBTQ plus and allies. So when we open our doors, everyone that's in the center is not a part of the community. We are supporting the entire community, the entire neighborhood that we're a part of. So as long as your organization looks like the neighborhood that you're serving, it's making sure you're not having to run into discrimination and turning people away for certain things. Yes.
Do you have individuals who aren't self-sufficient after the 2 to 3 years? Like I know at 18, 2 to 3 years after that, at 20, I wasn't self-sufficient. Like is IYG doing anything to fill that gap or to assist those individuals after that period?
So we have 6 months of continued case management. Unfortunately, the grant only pays for those up to 3 years. So we continue to have them come into the center. They can have case management, whether they are in housing or not. So we continue to support them through case management. They still have access to all employment resources. The only thing that ends is that housing. So we try to pair them with programs. If we see that there are some shortcomings that they're having. So right now, probably about 40% of our client list, we're in the process of getting them placed in permanent supportive housing. So that is another option. And so the case managers are working on getting all their paperwork and files and different things together from different hospitals. We just had one client accepted Tuesday into permanent supportive housing, and she's on her 3rd year, and she's 26. And we just knew it wasn't going to be a reality for her, but she qualified because she had that chronic status and she had the documentation to support it. So she just got accepted into that. So that has been a godsend, getting clients into that. We've had a few that we've sent to permanent supportive housing, but having the continued case management has helped. Sometimes when they leave us, they kind of fall on their face. But then we've seen with the continued support, them get on their feet, and we help them get employment, help them find affordable housing. Sometimes it's the housing providers that we work with in our rapid rehousing program. They'll continue to work with us, even with youth that aren't in our program. It's just not us providing the rental support. So we give them as much support as we can without providing that rental assistance, because that does happen. That age, I feel like they still need to be at home.
Yeah.
But they're with us.
My mom when I was at college and couldn't.
Yeah. So it's very difficult. We have seen some that unfortunately returned to homelessness. We have had great success on them being independent and stable. So what we do in our program is we gradually have them start paying small amounts of their rent. So they'll start off paying 10% of their rent, and then we go to 20%, and then 30%, and then we cap it at 50. So that way they can have some money saved up. So when they leave the program, they're not already struggling, because I'm sure they're not making enough money to really survive anyway. So they never really pay 50%. We've had a few that actually have taken on their whole rent at the end. We have 3 that are coming out, and they're paying full rent, and so they're going to be successful. Yes, so it's working with the younger populations, but building that trust and having that continued support. So my case managers meet with their clients in some capacity once a week, 2 in person for the month, and then they can do 2 virtual or in person, whatever it is. But having that constant contact, because sometimes it takes that for them to understand we're really here to help you. And when somebody's constantly bothering you, you're just like, oh my God, okay, I'll meet with you. And then after, they get to know you and they're like, oh, you actually are trying to help me. You're not someone that's just, once again, tolerating me, but you're really wanting to help me. And if you're bugging me everything, and then if they don't get a hold of them, when they reach out to them, they're going to contact you a couple times in that week. So eventually they're like, oh, well, maybe they actually do want to help me. Sometimes it clicks. But really the continued support with case management. We also have a food pantry at the center. We have clothing, hygiene products and stuff. So that kind of helps make up the need. Household items like toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies. We provide all that even after they have left the housing program. So that kind of helps the budget where they don't have so much to spend. So really continued case management, but it is hard in permanent supportive housing.
Okay, I know there's a question over here, and so 2 over here, and we'll come back.
Okay. Which one? Okay.
I was just curious, I'm not sure what your funding source is, but are any of your people in rapid rehousing eligible for like the moving on voucher that's just recently been released?
They are not. No. Unfortunately, yes, they're not. We did get some FYI vouchers back when, so there are a few, only got a few that have moved out recently and used those. That's it.
Oh, I was just going to say that I don't have the opportunity to work with people directly as much as I would like to these days. But, kind of building on what this gentleman said, there's going to be times when you feel uncomfortable, but, how we feel, that's us. That's, what we have to deal with. Because the people that are coming to us, no matter, what groups are coming to us, coming from crisis, from trauma, and we need to be as accommodating as possible, regardless of how we need to process. I like to say that 2012 Eddie was a good guy, was smart, was kind. 2023 Eddie is better, and I hope that I stay curious and I want to be able to learn and be able to help as many people as we can. Because that's the business we're in, right? This is not us selling, video games or whatever.
Right.
We're housing people. We are, making sure they have a roof over their head, that they feel safe and stable. So, however I feel, doesn't matter.
Right.
Just, I need to get over it and then get them their services and move on.
Yes. And then you can convey that by having some knowledge of them and their situation and what they're going through. That kind of helps break down that barrier as well. And understanding the language, understanding even different needs that they may have. I was not familiar with binders when I started. I mean, I knew about them, but I wasn't familiar with them when I started working at IYG because I never needed one. So those were things I had to educate myself, not only what binders are safe, how to size for them, ordering them. I just ordered like 4 last night, packers, gaffs, all these breast forms. Those were things that I had to learn about. So when you have, even if it's not like expert knowledge in those fields, if you have some knowledge and you are talking to your client and you can show them that you do have some interest in what they are interested in, some knowledge, that breaks barriers and that helps you be more effective in helping your client. Because at the ultimate end of the day, we want to make sure that we are being as effective as we can in helping our clients. We want them to live in continued success. So when they're done with whatever we're doing in their housing program, they will continue to be stable. That is my biggest thing. I don't want our 2-year rapid rehousing program to be a long-term homeless shelter program. And when they leave us, they're homeless again. That breaks my heart. I hate when that happens because I feel like, of course, we're not going to have 100% success rate, but I want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can possibly do to reach them, that if they fail, I can say, we tried everything possible. We did everything we absolutely could do. I don't want to leave any stone unturned. I don't want anyone to leave offended if I can help it. Sometimes you can't because we can't do everything, but I want to make sure it's nothing from my lack of effort or my ignorance that turned them away from the program or turned them away from getting help and assistance. So making sure that we are humbling ourselves if there's something that we don't know or we don't understand. And if a client corrects you about something, don't argue with that client. That's their experience, that's their truth. You can't take away from their truth.
It's not a question, but I appreciate you. I experience the other way around where they assume I'm an expert because I'm the parent of a child that's a part of the community. And so when you were just saying that you're not necessarily an expert just because you have a granddaughter or daughter or someone, and I just appreciate you saying that because sometimes people give me a hard time if I don't know. And so my child just said, I don't even know everything, and I'm a part of.
I'm exactly same. It was so much that I know my bubble of the community, and I had to learn all of the other bubbles and aspects of the community because it is a community and it's so different, and we have to respect those differences, and that's what it's about at the end of the day. And when you break that barrier down, you just see so much growth in your client. You see so much movement. Because so many people don't take the time to educate themselves. If you think about something that even is an interest to you or something that you're passionate about and you meet somebody that shares that passion and you can talk to them, that's exciting. That's exciting. So if someone who is supposed to help me understands me, that is exciting, especially when I've worked with so many people that didn't understand me or judge me or condemn me. And you have taken the time to understand me, even if it's just a little bit, you will be amazed. Like I said, asking pronouns, her eyes just like, I almost want to cry every time I think about it because it was something so small, but she was just overwhelmed because that made her feel welcome because she had been rejected so much just for being her true self. So it's little things. We don't have to start in a big training right away, but if we can just do the little things to show that these clients are welcome in your organizations, those little things matter. Even if, I don't know how things are set up, but in our center, we do have pictures of different community leaders and different things that are up on the walls. We made sure that those community leaders were also a part of the LGBTQ plus community in all colors as well. Make sure that we are covering the BIPOC community as well and local people if possible. So we just didn't do celebrities. We have local people up and it talks about their story in the community. Those are things where it's not even something that you're saying, but they walk in and they can see. If you walk in and see a little rainbow flag, that alleviates some anxiety. And it could be something little just sitting on a desk. And that's like, okay, I'm not going to get discriminated against here. That's something, and I from experience can tell you, like that alleviates anxiety. Just little things like that. Yes.
Any suggestions on how to circumvent staff who may have a resistance to training due to like religious beliefs?
Hire new people.
That is
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about religion, we're also talking about treating everybody in loving kindness, giving everybody, treating everybody equitably. So this is education. Your religion does not prevent you from learning, I would assume. And pretty much all of the major religions, the Abrahamic religions, all talk about loving kindness as the base. So we're just wanting to treat our clients with love, and we're just teaching you how to treat people with respect, which is the base of most religions. So this is not to convert you or say that you agree with it. This is to help treat our clients with respect, because that is what we are called to do if we're working in social work, we're working in housing, we're treating clients with respect. So we want to make sure we're not being disrespectful to anybody that we work with. So this is teaching us how to respect our clients. This is not getting you to agree with them, but to treat them. So they might not give the energy of welcoming to the client. We might only get tolerance from them, but at least it is respectful tolerance. Yeah.
So with that, our time is up. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And please give a hand to Kenya. Thank you so much. Before you walk out, I just want to put in a massive plug for some upcoming IHCDA training on the Equal Access Rule, which, if you are not familiar, the Equal Access Rule seeks to ensure that individuals are served regardless of sexual orientation, or gender identity. I'm abbreviating here. And has some particular implications for emergency shelter. We will be providing some training on that at the end of June, so please look out for some communication from the grants team on that. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you so much.